Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're enjoying your time off, if you're having time off, and playing some chess. We had a nice tournament yesterday with the Chess Boot Camp Club. I've got a game to share with you, and I thought I've got to share this. I played one game today after I woke up on the iPad in bed, and I went into the game thinking, if I play at my best, I know I can win this game. Right? It's one of those. That's the attitude that you kind of have to take in to every game, you know. And what I'm trying to think is, I am a 1700, 1800 in waiting. Right. All I need to do is to fulfill my potential, and I'll be able to get there. Right. Which means having the discipline. Which means avoiding the mistakes. Which means learning from the kind of built-in errors that, you know, my weaknesses, my pitfalls. I just need to overcome those. It's not terribly difficult, all right? Anyway, this game is packed with interesting tactical calculation ideas. So we'll take you through it, and then at the end we'll do the analysis and see what I missed, because I'd like to learn, okay? So I have the black pieces, and we have a Scandi, okay? And then white takes, and out comes my knight. Okay, so we have the queen's knight comes out, which is fine. I mean, you can simply, you've got an overwhelm on here, so you can just take the pawn with the knight, not with the queen, and we have takes and takes. So at this point, comfortable, right? Move 4, quite comfortable, and this bishop is now tied to the defense of that. I have a queen out in the board, but there's no knight here that can jump to c3 to harass my queen. So I feel like I have half a step in front, you know. So white now plays d4. I bring out my knight. So simple case of counting attackers and defenders, right? What colour should we do? Red or green? You know. So 2 attackers, 1 defender. Therefore, we need another defender. Okay. Now, what would you play here? I play bishop g4, pin the defender. So now the knight is pinned and is not defending the pawn. So now again, I could capture the pawn. Okay. However, what if queen takes? I take pawn, queen takes, I take knight. If queen takes queen, bishop takes, and I'm a pawn up, I think. See, it's amazing how much scope there is for calculation even in relatively simple situations. Now this one just gets a couple of levels more complicated, as you'll see in a second. So I don't know if actually if knight takes is possible there, but we'll look at that later. Okay, so now we have c3, adding a third defender. Well, actually a second defender, because this knight really effectively reduced the defender count to 1. Now, one option I do have here is bishop takes knight. Okay, and if pawn takes, it messes up white's pawns really badly, and with this move, castling long is less of an option. Okay, and if queen takes, I can trade queens and again mess up his pawns. So maybe that might have been an option. It's not what I played. What I played was long castles, putting my rook on the semi-open d-file, which is something that is very, very common in this modern Scandi. Because you've lost your d-pawn. Probably in the regular Scandi as well, I don't know really. Still, this is an option. Okay, so now what's the situation? Now I have 1 takes. If I take with the queen, knight takes, boom, and then it starts to get then you start to have to go like this. You know, you have to take your socks off to calculate. All right, but what white does now is play bishop to e2 to break this pin on the knight. Okay, so now I have a think for over a minute, okay, before my next move. What I'm trying to think is e5 playable? Okay, So, if I play e5, because there's a lot of moving parts here, and this isn't even the most complicated of situations, you know, the Grandmaster's games get a lot more convoluted than this. But it's interesting to look at a position like this, or a puzzle, and to see where you just give up on the calculation. And at some point, I gave up on the calculation on this, right? So what I'm trying to figure out is, can I play e5? If e5 and pawn takes, okay, and I'm doing this on the tablet, so I don't have arrows as well, right? E5 and pawn takes. If I take the queen, bishop takes the queen. Rook takes bishop, king takes rook, there, and it's like, how do you visualize the board at that point, you know? But to get better, that's what we got to do, guys, right? So here, in pawn takes, I probably wouldn't take the queen. Then what if I take the knight? And bishop takes, I take the queen, bishop comes back. Have I won a pawn? This is the big question, right? I do that. He takes my pawn, okay? I take his knight, he takes back, so he's a pawn up. I take queen, he takes queen. No, I'm down a pawn. Yeah, and then he just castles and he's happy, okay? Now, I play e5, knight takes e5. What about that, you know? Then how about knight takes knight? Pawn takes knight. Queen takes queen, bishop takes there. So here I am down a pawn, right? Or how about bishop takes bishop? Queen takes bishop, that's equal, I'm still down a pawn, right? But then I take the knight, but then his queen's here. Right, what if queen takes? And at that point, there's so much dependent on what black does, I just played e5. Right? And then he thinks for a minute and 40 seconds as well, because he's got the same problem, right? And then he completely surprises me by playing bishop e3. Okay. Now, here I spot what I think is an opportunity. So I think now, for a minute 41 seconds. So this is really, really interesting. And if you look at the timings on games, there are some moves that you can play in 5 or 10 seconds. There are some moves that merit a minute or 2 minutes because you recognize it's the crux of the game. The crux is it's Latin for cross, but in rock climbing, the crux move is the move on a climb or a route or a pitch of a route, which is the most difficult and most important, critical. It's the critical position on the pitch, yeah. And if you can do the crux move, you should be fine. Now here, so what I'm looking at here is takes. If pawn takes, I'm happy. He's messed up his pawns, right? Takes. If bishop takes, can I push and kind of make the bishop bad? Okay, so this is what happens. I take, bishop takes, obviously. Then e4, and I know that if the bishop comes here, I have f5, which is indeed what happens. Now, the bishop could come here, but then g6, then the bishop's going to be forced to retreat there, okay? So the bishop now retreats to h3. Now this pawn is actually pinned. It's defended by my queen, but it's pinned. So, important position. My opponent wants to castle, right? Now, if you can prevent your opponent from castling, that can be an important strategic plus in your favour. So I could, for example, put my queen here and target f1 and stop him castling, but then he captures my pawn with check. So I can't do that right now, but I kind of like to do it. This is another idea. Queen to here still defends this pawn and attacks this one. But again, if I take that pawn, he takes this with check. Okay, now, another level that you need to be thinking about is the quality of pieces. Right? Not all bishops are worth 3. Not all pawns are worth 1. This bishop right now, okay. So if you think about it, the potential of why are bishops and knights given a nominal kind of computative score of 3? Okay. So we'll take a quick break, and I'm going to pull up an analysis board. Okay, and we'll just put a bishop on the board. Okay. Now, if you look at this, a bishop can control up to, so from that square, what's that? 13 squares, right? So that's the maximum. Now, in real life, a bishop rarely controls 13 squares. It quite often controls fewer than that. So what you say is, 6 is kind of typical, and if you halve that, you get 3. Now let's get rid of the bishop. How do I get rid of the bishop? Okay, and put a knight on, right? Now, we know that a knight can control up to 8 squares, okay? So, in real life, probably not usually 8, call it 6 again, half that, you get 3. Now a queen, now let's go rook now, okay? So a rook, right, obviously that's 14, so that's a bit more, okay? So 14 is a bit more than the bishop, quite a bit more than the knight, but rooks are given a score of 5, and that's partly because they also have the ability to own files, own ranks, and also prevent kings from being able to escape, okay, which a single rook and a single bishop can't do. So a rook being in charge of 14 squares is given a score of 5, and queens is the same as a rook, the same 14, yeah, as a rook. And in fact, wherever you put the rook on the board, it's got 14 squares, but it's also got 23, 27 here, okay? So that's significantly more, which is why, so I guess you divide it by 3. So queen, 27 squares divided by 3, you get 9, which is what we get. Rook, 14 divided by 3, slightly under 5, yeah? Bishop is, what did we say, 13 divided by 3, so it's about 4, okay? And a knight, 8 squares divided by 3, just under 3. So that maybe that's how kind of people work it out. But it's to do with the control of squares. Now a pawn typically controls 2 squares. Yeah. Divide that by 3, it's a bit less than 1. Okay. But a pawn on the edge of the board controls only 1 square, which is why these pawns are definitely worth less than these guys. Okay. So just build that into your thinking. Now, coming back to this position, a bishop, right, with the freedom of the board, can control up to 13 squares, okay? This one is controlling none at all, okay? It's got the square that it's on and that's it, okay? So this bishop is not a 3-pointer. This bishop is a 1-pointer or a half-point piece with the potential maybe later on to become a 3-pointer again. So this is a bad bishop. So one of the things that came out, I had really good discussions with Craig when we were commentating on the Chess Boot Camp tournament yesterday. And there are a couple of things that we were talking about, what is the difference in growing from 1,000 to 1,500 where I am, or 2,000 to where Craig is, and how does your thinking evolve through that process? And a couple of things that we said was, one is that really understanding the value of pieces. Making your opponent's pieces bad is a significant one. And another one was, there's a lot more, and you see this when you look at IMs and GMs commentating on games, there's a lot more about the control of squares. So it's more about squares than it is about pieces, if you get the point later on. Anyway, so point is, this bishop's a really bad bishop right now. And if my opponent wants the castle there, he's going to have to move this pawn to get that bishop to do anything. So, 16 seconds, I play g6 because I see an opportunity to imprison this bishop over there. He's got no squares right now. That bishop is iced out of the game. You're out, you know. Next batter, please. White castles. Now I move my king just out of line of this bishop, right? I just want to avoid any complications of that. Now, at the same time, I'm starting to think about attacking opportunities, right? So, one idea is making use of this dark square diagonal, right? I've got a light squared pawn chain, okay, which allows dark squared movement. My opponent has a dark squared pawn chain, but on the wrong side of the board, so that doesn't really affect me, okay? So this pawn chain doesn't do anything with regard to his king other than this guy. And this guy's a pain because he's covering this square. Because what I'd love to do is put my bishop there, queen there, checkmate, thank you very much, move on with your day. But I can't because of this pawn. So, white now plays queen c2, and that slightly confused me, but he only thought for 1.8 seconds over that move. I guess all he's thinking is connect your rooks, complete development, connect your rooks, okay? So, this bishop now has some scope, really, yeah? So this square in particular looks kind of good, or even this one looking at the rook. So this is his good bishop, and this bishop's rubbish. My remaining bishop, okay, is dark squared, which is a great match for my light squared pawns at this point in the game. So getting my bishop here, maybe push that pawn, drop the bishop back, queen here, something like that might be an idea. So we'll think, okay. So now, I think now it's time, okay? And this is completely strategic idea. We've got opposite side castling, okay? What do you do with opposite side castling? Throw pawns at your opponent, right? Pawn storm. It's the way things are done, right? These pawns are worthless pawns. These pawns, I've said this so many times, you could pick these off the board and throw them on the floor, happy days, you line up your rooks, you know, against your opponent's king, and you smash in the back doors, yeah? No trouble. These pawns are cannon fodder, right? These pawns are the king's personal bodyguard and very, very important indeed. So you want these pawns to meet each other and mingle, and you want blood to be spilt. Okay, my opponent tries a similar thing. Now, 40 seconds wait here, 40 seconds of deep thought by Hunty. Okay, what move did I play and was it good? Right, Eagle SMZ here from Russia is attacking my queen. Now, when you are a beginner in chess, you go, oh no, my queen, I must run away. Okay, and my first thought was to run here. And then I thought, no, maybe that's not a good idea. Why? Because of pawn to d5 with a fork on queen and knight, defended by another pawn, okay? So that would be, if I just snatched at my first idea, I'd have lost, right? Or I'd have been in a very bad position. I'd have lost a knight, okay? Queen takes, queen take, oh no, it's got pawn here. But you know, really, really bad position at the 1500 level. So, I had to think. Now, so first I start looking at, well, what can I do with my queen? And then I start looking at, well, what other options are there? So, when you have a piece under attack, there are lots of things that you can do. Can you capture the attacker? Well, here, no, that's not an idea, right? Can you evade the piece? Well, yes, I can. I can come here, or even here, or whatever, right? Or even here. Can you pin the attacking piece? Well, no. You know, even if I had a bishop I could put there, all I can really pin it against, oh, maybe, no, couldn't even put a rook there, you know, so no, doesn't work, okay? Now, another option is the counter-attack. So what can I counter-attack here that raises the danger levels, as Levy would put it? What can I counter-attack when my own queen is under attack, right? There's no checks at all, right? So I can't attack the king. So what on earth could I possibly do? Well, here's what I found. Knight takes d4. And you're like, huh, that's interesting, right? Because now, so what I'm thinking, and obviously this is a 10-minute game, so I've only got enough mental cycles to go through to a certain level. So here's what I'm thinking. You want to take my queen? Fine, I take your queen, attack your rook and your bishop. Okay? And this is your good bishop. That bishop's shite. That's rubbish. Okay? Okay? So you take my queen here, I take your queen, your rook has to move, my knight takes your bishop, open up the pawns around the king, you've got an isolated pawn, and that is slightly better for me. Now my opponent goes, okay, well I'll take the knight. Okay, so I've just won a pawn here, right? Take the knight. And then I go, oh, bugger, right? Because he's attacking my rook. So here I think for 50 seconds, okay? 50 seconds very well spent, 52 seconds, okay? Now, I can't just take the pawn, lose my queen, right? If I just say drop the queen back, I lose a rook. If I capture the bishop, rook d1, either rook to d1, okay? And if my queen moves, rook takes rook here, checkmate, back rank, checkmate, right? So I can't capture the bishop, right? Because rook here, and I can't then, if it was just two rooks, right, without the defense protection of the queen, I could take the rook, rook takes, I take, and I've checkmated him. But if I take the bishop, let's say rook there, I take rook, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, queen takes rook, I think I'm down a rook for a queen at that point. I've won two rooks and lost a rook and a queen. No good. However, there is an escape. Okay? Queen takes d4. And my opponent plays immediately rook a to d1. But here's what I've spotted. Queen f6. Get in. Now, I confess, I didn't see that move when I played any of these. Okay? Because this is 1500 chess. This isn't Grandmaster chess. Okay? But I found it. That's the important thing. Okay? And now I'm up a pawn. So I'm up a pawn. Let's do a review. Okay? I have 4 pawns on the king side to his 3. We have 3 each on the queen side. Both kings are castled. Rooks are relatively active. We have tension, rook tension on the open file. I have a better bishop. That's very important. My bishop can come here or here, you know, lining up at my opponent's king's area. My opponent's bishop is trapped in by my light squared pawn chain. So this is good for me. He now decides to trade rooks, which maybe isn't the smartest thing in the world, but then he puts his own rook, again defended by the queen. You see the importance of defending the root square on an open file, okay? So we had a game yesterday that we were commentating on, slightly lower level game, where we had the queens are off the board, and then one of the sides castled his king to safety. Whereas our thought was, instead of like castling here and putting a rook here, just put the king here and then bring the rook across, because the king here defends the end of the open file. The end of the open file is really important. Anyway, so I have to move my queen. Move the queen. Now queen comes down looking at my rook. How dare you, sir, right? So develop the bishop, discovered defense of the rook. Always remember discovered defense, very important. Okay, now hits the bishop. Doesn't matter, hits the queen. Queen retreats to a light square. Good idea. Now, I've still got to be very careful about back rank mates because my king is in the middle of these 3 pawns. Okay, I don't really want to put my king here because that effectively hangs that pawn, because this pawn can't recapture because it would be check, right? So I don't really want to put my king there. I've thought about playing c6, king c7, maybe, but you've just got to watch your back. This is now a case of convert the small advantage. I've got 2 small advantages. I've got Eddie, which my opponent doesn't have, and I've got a good bishop, whereas his is poo. Okay, so queen e7 guards these key squares, and I might have ideas about putting my rook here and trying to trade off rooks. If he doesn't trade off rooks, I own the open file. Okay, he pushes up with his pawns on this side. I'm thinking 3 pawns against 3 pawns, I should be okay. Also because I have an active bishop and he doesn't. Now I play c6. Now he pushes, so he wants to bring Bobby the bad bishop back into the game. Okay, so here or here. Okay, so rook d8, obvs. And now I'm starting to push up. Okay, so I'm thinking now about coming after this pawn. Right? He's pushed this pawn, that makes it a target. Right? Now you see, if he hadn't pushed this pawn, if this pawn was back here, and I push Harry up to there, then he pushes this. Oh, and we have blocked off pawns on the h-file, right? But because he's extended his pawn first, I get to attack the pawn. Now, Harry to h4, this pawn, I have control of this pawn, because either he takes, if he doesn't take, I can take him. If he advances, I've got a pawn here on the 5th rank to take him. So I'm going to peel open this king. So, next, my opponent is trying to get some counterplay on the queen side when my king is castled. Okay, so now Harry goes up to h4, like we said. Now he pushes again, and I'm like, this is all right. I'll just take it off. Okay, now we have 2 against 2, right? But you know, I've got stuff, and my pieces are active around this side, and also preparing to attack my opponent's king as well. So Harry takes Gary, Freddie takes Gary. Okay, now this is where it starts to get very interesting and sharp. Right, questions. Do I trade off rooks? And my answer is yes, because I spy, with my little eye, something beginning with C. Takes, queen takes, C pawn. With check as well. And that's important. So there's, because otherwise this is scary, right? My queen wasn't there to block. That's actually checkmate, right? Fortunately, my queen is there. So I've just got to be very, very careful watching my king safety at this point. And I'm now 2 pawns up. I've got a 1 pawn majority on the queen side, king side, 1 pawn majority on the queen side as well. So he has to get out of check. Off he goes to there. Now king here, key square. What's it doing? Stopping the queen from accessing any of these 3 squares. Absolutely critical. So queen now comes to here, and I see your mind, right? He wants to bring the queen in here with a fork and check and win that pawn. So I'm like, oh no, you don't. See how I'm trying to put my stuff on, all my important pieces are now on dark squares to ghost this bishop out. Okay, so queen's defending this. Queen is defending an awful lot of squares now, yeah? So that queen is very much in control. Bishop here now, which I didn't quite get. Okay, now I've got options here. I mean, I thought about, is there a convincing attack now? If I put my queen in here, I'm thinking he's not going to go on the back rank. I'm thinking he's going to put his king here. Then I guess I've got a check here, but then we go kind of backwards and forwards. So, a very different kind of chess now. Very kind of spatial. We have to be able to see all these different possibilities from all these different angles. So I figure that the easiest thing to do is get my pawns off the light squares, try and remove 1 or 2 of these pawns, and then use my queen and my bishop if I can to deliver checkmate. He attacks Freddie. I'm unimpressed, right? Push him up, trade. Now, I've got 2 choices. Take with the pawn, take with the bishop. I decide to take with the bishop because it gives me an overwhelm on this pawn. And it just kind of opens things up, My bishop is now looking at squares. Whereas if I take him with a pawn, yes, my pawns are still connected, but my bishop is kind of slightly locked out. I mean, maybe take with the pawn was better. And then I've got options of this with check, also attack that pawn. But I took with the bishop. He puts his bishop there, looking at Eddie. I throw in a check there. Here, defended by the bishop, but he has a square. He can go there. Right? Now, was that checkmate? Did I miss a checkmate? I went here, he goes there. I think I missed a checkmate here. Yeah. Oh, I've really got to work on spotting checkmates, especially mate in 1. Okay, so check again. King's running away. Okay, he gives a check now, and it's getting real. So now he grabs the loose pawn. Okay, so that was poor for me. I knew I'd messed up a little bit somewhere. Okay, propose a trade of queens. Are you interested? No. Okay, now what can I do? I can force a trade of queens. Queen d6. This queen can't move because she's pinned against the king. Absolute pin. If whatever the queen does, even if the bishop defends, I can take the queen. Okay, so queens come off. Now my opponent here probably should grab that pawn. Doesn't. I start running up the board with Gary. Gary is now in a safe square, defended by this bishop. King comes up. But I've got an issue down here, right? If I go a6, pawn takes, right? Pawn takes, maybe bishop takes, all right? But the king can't take on there because of the bishop, yeah? So I bring my king up and back again. And now I decide I can do this, right? So takes. Now, this is interesting, right? And this is where you really have to be fluent in your endgame stuff, right? So we have a bishop and 2 pawns against a bishop, right? But if this bishop captures and I capture the bishop, right? Is this winning or not? I have no idea, right? I don't know my endgames enough, but I reckon if I could get, say, my king here, my bishop onto here, controlling these squares, and that he's got to go here, check, should be winning, yeah, should be winning. Okay, so there's some messing around, okay, so, right, this is anchored, I'm doing nothing with these, I just want to keep those. I want to get my A pawn up here. Now, he's guarding this square with his bishop, so I bring my king around, here. Now I push the pawn. Now again, he's got another opportunity to take with the bishop. He does. Okay, and now we get our answer to the question. Okay. So the king comes in. Kings are in opposition here, right? Means these squares are out of bounds. He can only go that way or that way. Okay. Now if he goes here, I play this and he can't, you know, it's immediately losing. But here, and now because I have my bishop, I can give check. Where does he go? Comes into the corner. And this is now all over because g2 comes with check. He can't come here. He really wants to go there and block the pawn. That's his only hope, right? If there was no bishop and he can go here and my king goes there, it's stalemate. And it's a draw. But he can't, he has to go there, then queen to here, and that is check, and he resigns. Okay? So, interesting game there, and I think particularly that end game was fascinating. Now, let's have a look at the review, because I'm sure there are some lessons in all of this. I think, yeah, oh my goodness me, it's like a Christmas tree. So I had the advantage for most of the game. There's a lot of errors in there. I made 11 mistakes and 5 blunders and still came out with 72 accuracy. Wow. Wow. Okay, well, let's enjoy the ride. Okay, so this is all book. Okay. Now d4. Knight c6 is best. Good. Bishop g4 is excellent. Best move is... Yeah, okay. So what we're looking at is effective pin on this pawn. So if pawn takes, we trade queens and he loses castling rights. Yeah. And I'll probably win the pawn back. If knight takes, pawn must take. Again, trade queens. Okay, so that's one to remember. Anyway, so I did this inaccuracy. So the computer's saying probably that is better. That is excellent. Best move here was, again, e5. The computer loves control of the center, doesn't it? Okay, so I castle, he plays this. Best move, good. E5 is best. Now, finally, I play the best move, and I have a slight edge. Bishop E3 is a mistake. And next I played bishop takes F3. Blunder. Blunder. You missed a better way to trade pieces, okay? I guess bishop takes here and my queen's in discomfort, right? Okay, because the line would be, yeah, bishop takes. Yeah, that's not a nice position. Okay, best move would have been pawn takes here. And I'm 2. It's -2 in black's favour. Why is that better? Okay, well I get to develop my bishop with check, eh? So, hang on. So with this, why can't bishop take? Knight takes, pawn takes anyway, right? And he's given up a bishop. And then this. Okay. So what I need to ask myself now, I really need to kind of delve into this and say, what is it about my game that I missed here? And I think the key thing is, this is an important opportunity to develop with a threat. Okay, so the computer didn't like that move very much. I take, so it's just too, I mean, this kind of stuff is easy if you're a computer. Right? It gets very difficult if you're made of meat. So don't take the knight. Take this. Knight takes, maybe bishop takes, queen takes. We take the knight, takes, bang. So whatever happens, because he's using the c-pawn as a defender of the d-pawn, if he ever has to capture with that, I get this line. I think that's the key. So what it is saying, okay, in this position, is there an opportunity for me to develop my final piece? Maybe that's the thing. Anyway, but we don't get that, we get this. Blunder. Now gives the edge to white. Best move. That's good. Ah, okay. But I played that. Bishop to here, inaccurate, yeah. Best, best. Okay. Best move. Good. I'm pleased about that. Because it's one of those moves where you think, is this just a bit too slow and a bit too conservative and quiet? But no, right? Okay, castle's best. King b8 is good. Was there a better move? h5, right? Start the charge. Start the charge early. And then probably something like bishop here and then push f4, defended by the bishop, right? And then, oh, I can't push f4 yet because I still have to move the king. But I moved the king. Okay, so move the king. It's not a huge difference. Okay, queen c2, inaccuracy, yeah. I was confused by that move myself. Excellent. Blunder. This leads to losing material, okay? And here, guys, we come into the second critical point. Now, do I play the right thing? Hallelujah. Knight takes d4 is a great move. Get in. Best. 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 Boom. Now, okay, again, hands up. I confess I didn't see it before the exchange. Best. Forced. And now I have a huge advantage. It's minus 2.81 now for black. Okay. Best. Whatevs. Queen e1 best. Good. So you can see here, I'm keeping my queen on the same line as my rook because I don't have another rook. And rooks like to have a buddy. Okay. So I'm keeping my queen on the back rank so that when this bishop moves, right, my queen and rook are defending each other. So here, queenie comes in to attack my rook. Bishop d6 is best, you know, putting on this diagonal, and I'm protecting my rook. That's okay. Best move. Mistake. Mistake. It says that you no longer have a winning position. It's still pretty good. What was better here? And that seems such a tiny difference, doesn't it? But the difference is minus 2.45 or minus 4. Anyway, I played that. That's okay. That's best. Good. Pleased about that. That's good. That's a mistake. Why? It's still 2.3. Apparently 2. Black 2.2. So I don't know, but what was the best move then? Best move was, again, it really wants me just to crush my pawns up on the king side. Oh, yeah, king side. Okay, so anyway, I do that. That's a mistake. That's inaccurate. The computer wanted me to trade rooks. Now I play h5 and it goes, no, that's a mistake. It's like, oh, come on. Really? Now it's a mistake. Now it's closer to equal. Best move was... Pin this pawn. The bishop's defended and can't be harassed by pawns because there's no pawns here. So now he's built this little pyramid here. At least I can pin that pawn. But hey, we don't do that. We do that. He does that. Apparently a mistake. That's a mistake again. But I was quite happy there. That's a mistake. Gosh. Goodness gracious me. Oh, so if he takes, I recapture with a rook and pins this pawn, and then queen can take that pawn. Ah, didn't even cross my mind. You know, sometimes you look at pawns against pawns and you're only thinking pawns. Didn't think that was even a possibility. So if this takes, what would be the best way to recapture? Well, how about a rook on there? Okay, good. Thank you, computer. Okay, not good. Ooh, is he saying bishop takes is better? No, trading rooks is better. Okay. And then it's almost equal for white. Wow. Okay, mistake. Blunder. Leads to losing material, does it? Rook takes d1. Yes, there we go. I did see it. Okay, so now we're 2 pawns up. And we'll move a bit quicker. Okay, see here, king c7, best move. Yeah, just defending these squares. So important in the ending. Okay, that's good. That's a mistake. Right. Should have done king there. Okay, so I mean, it gets out of this fork that when the king was there, yeah. And it, you know, king's still on the dark square. Yeah. Well, I don't know really. Okay, bishop there, mistake. Mistake. What should I have done? Because the rest of this game is littered. Oh, it's not too bad actually. At this point in the game is littered with blunders and stuff from me. Okay, so that's best. That's a blunder. Hang on, let's just go back a couple. Okay, bishop mistake. Blunder. That's a blunder. What should I have done? Straight away. Okay. Now apparently winning because I guess, oh yeah. So if the king goes here now, I have this check. It has to go here. I have that check. It has to go here. Ooh, yeah. So I do that. Blunder. Mistake. Best move was again queen in. Okay. Because that would have gone discovery on the, okay. Anyway, so what do we do? So we do this, then it's best, okay, blunder. This allows a forced checkmate, which yours truly missed. king here is a blunder. Oh no, you missed mate in 1. Yes, I know. Okay, well let's now... So this is all inaccurate, horrible stuff. And finally I play that move. Okay, likes that. Doesn't like that. You're going to end up losing material. Yeah, I lose a pawn, don't I? Best move here. King takes pawn. Doofus. Free stuff. Okay, it's a great move. Blah. And that's a blunder. He should have just taken the pawn. I said that. Yeah, should have taken the pawn. Okay, now anything else? That's a blunder. Oh my lord. Oh my word. Difference is minus 2.5 for black or minus 62. I had a queen ready to go. Oh my. You probably saw that in the video, but hey. So yeah, fascinating stuff, I thought. Let's just see the end. So I've got my pawn relatively safe. That's all best. Okay. King, there's good, good. Now, trades, has to. Okay, but it's minus 62. It's basically, it's saying it's a 1 position. So what you need to remember, guys, is bishop and a pawn against nothing is a 1 position. Okay, and you know, we know how it ends. So I thought that was a really, really useful game to share with you, but even more so the analysis. And you know, the big question is, have I taken away some lessons from that? And I definitely have. So I'm grateful for that. Onwards and upwards. Let's hit 1600 in 2022. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.